It is the very elixir of life, a natural resource upon which the whole of the living world remains utterly dependent. In a most practical and real sense, it is a resource more valuable than gold. And yet, it is also a resource which we tend to all too often take for granted, barely giving it a second thought. That is, of course, until we happen to find ourselves without it. It is water, bland, colorless, odorless, yet so essential in so many ways. According to the United Nations, lack of access to safe, sufficient, and affordable water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities has a devastating effect on the health, dignity, and prosperity of billions of people, and has significant consequences for the realization of other human rights. This realization is why, on August 3rd of 2010, the General Assembly of the United Nations recognized access to clean water and sanitation as a universal human right that is tantamount to other rights such as life and liberty, freedom of expression, and education. Yet throughout the world, water scarcity, contaminated water, and waterborne diseases continues to present an emergent and severe threat to public health. As the citizens of the wealthiest and most powerful nation on earth, one could be forgiven for thinking that our republic is immune from such basic deprivations. But water quality challenges, they're not unique to just developing nations. Rather, wealthier nations, such as the United States, are in many ways even more susceptible to these challenges, as the toxic cocktails of industrialization seep into our waterways, contaminating water with fecal bacteria, nitrogen, plastics, pharmaceuticals, and all other varieties of waste. For most of us, water flows into our homes with the twist of a knob. The process upon which this elixir is channeled from the conduits of nature, treated and delivered into our houses, goes largely unnoticed. When we turn on the tap to quench our thirst, cleanse our bodies, or prepare our food, we automatically assume that the water is safe, trusting that our government, for all its faults, takes seriously the vitality that clean and safe water affords. However, this trust in government and the process that delivers this elixir of life into our homes is sadly and woefully displaced. Even when our government puts forth its best effort, the effects of our nation's rapid industrialization are catching up to us and creating problems that we seem quite ill-equipped to solve. Our healthy water supply is compromised by numerous forces, including intensified agriculture, more variable rainfall patterns due to global warming, fracking, and industrial waste contamination. Nitrogen, a byproduct of fertilizers, inevitably enters rivers, lakes, and oceans, where it is then transformed into nitrates. These nitrates are responsible for a long range of adverse health conditions, including the potentially fatal blue baby syndrome, which starves infants' bodies of oxygen. Those people who survive early exposure to nitrates are often condemned to long-term health consequences for the rest of their lives. While an additional kilogram of nitrogen fertilizer per hectare increases agricultural yields by as much as 5%, the accompanying runoff and releases into water can increase childhood stunting by as much as 19%. Salt is another elementary contaminant that is on the rise in soils and bodies of water. A recent report found that enough food is lost each year because of saline water to feed 170 million people. Microplastics are another contaminant of growing concern. And while plastic is immeasurable in its usefulness, the unintended byproducts of its use have consequences that are both widespread and nearly impossible to quantify. Many studies have detected microplastics in 80% of global freshwater sources, 81% of municipal tap water, and get this, 93% of bottled water. It is very costly and time-consuming to remove these invisible plastic bits once they have infiltrated a water source. And guess what? regulations about safe levels are guesses at best. We have no means of knowing the long-term consequences of impure water on human health. What we do know is that there are around 1.1 million Americans with insecure access to water. Furthermore, there are around 2 million Americans who are without running water. Does anyone want to take a guess at which Americans struggle the most to collect on their human right of access to safe water? I'm sure that it comes as no surprise that water insecurity issues disproportionately affect communities of color and low-income people. And this brings us to the true topic of today's show. Not water, but social justice. Social justice is a relatively new concept, born of the struggles that have emerged in the industrial age. The term is defined as a belief that all people deserve equal rights and opportunities within society. The path to achieving social justice is to establish strong and meaningful policies that support the optimal development of all citizens as individuals for the greater good of the whole. At the end of the Second World War, state intervention and extensive redistribution policies helped to improve the distribution of income and access to much-needed public services. These interventions served to resolve the social and economic crises of the 1930s through the implementation of policies and programs aimed at fighting poverty and the development of social security schemes financed by extensive and progressive tax systems. But with the rise and global expansion of our friend capitalism, especially following the collapse of the Soviet Union, social democracy retreated. And so too did the notion that there should be public institutions at both the national and international levels that defined the common good, pursued social justice, and had the power to take effective action. The pursuit of social and economic justice is hampered by the concentration of wealth and power that accompanies the dissemination of the capitalist ethos. Throughout the epochs of history, the advances made by humankind have been largely conceived by extraordinary figures, from philosophers, scientists, political leaders, and even courageous citizens, then implemented by the institutions governing society. However, these positive trends and advances are never complete, and often regress with time, and the persistent resistance by the ruling class. The failure to actively maintain and pursue social and economic justice is not, of course, without consequence. Neglect in the pursuit of social justice, in all its dimensions, translates into a de facto acceptance of a future that is marred by violence, repression, and absolute chaos. Advancements in social justice require constant pressure from organized political forces. Brief and sporadic protests and demonstrations against injustices tend to have a quite limited effect. Much of the problem results from the fact that few political regimes have capable institutions, policies, or processes to promote and act on the effective expression of grievances and demands by those who are not benefiting from the current social and economic arrangements. Political parties, as we have seen, become corrupted and reduced to partisan establishments that are solely focused on winning elections. Trade unions, a powerful force in the pursuit of social justice and economic justice, well, they're declining in both number and influence. The monetization of social relations and social institutions at every level are eroding public trust and the stability of liberal democracy. A case in point are the nearly 200,000 citizens of Jackson, Mississippi, who have indefinitely lost access to reliable and safe water. Residents of Jackson have been plagued by water shutdowns for nearly a decade, in addition to boil orders warnings that urges them to literally boil water that is piped into their homes, which is foul and undrinkable, unless they take steps to purify it, and do that themselves, by the way. The Jackson water crisis in the news today was brought on by the recent flooding of the Pearl River. But the current damage is a result of long-time neglect and a failing water treatment system that, according to Jackson's mayor, has had a history of equipment breakdowns. The consequences are quite grim, leaving the city unable to fight fires, flush toilets, cook and prepare food, shower and wash their hands, and meet other critical needs. It's no surprise, of course, that this crisis primarily affects the most impoverished citizens, who also happen to be predominantly people of color. Although Mississippi is the poorest state in our nation, areas with a majority of white residents do not experience the same failures of infrastructure. This is thanks to a long history of state leaders who have funneled funding away from communities with less political power, both legally and otherwise, to prioritize vital resources for the needs of the wealthy. As you can imagine, this is not social justice. Depriving citizens of their human right to water is also not new to America. We cannot forget the criminal disregard which led to the ongoing crisis in Flint, Michigan, beginning in 2014 when the city switched its drinking water supply from Detroit's system to the Flint River as a cost-saving initiative. The move resulted in a drastic reduction of water quality, which led to a catastrophic public health crisis. For more than 18 months, despite complaints from residents of foul-smelling, discolored, and off-tasting water, city officials ignored the concerns of citizens. Despite evidence of a mounting problem as Flint residents experienced skin rashes, hair loss, and other chronic health symptoms. It was only through the relentless and determined efforts of community members, with help from local physicians, scientists, and independent journalists, that the source of the problem was eventually discovered. But of course, by then, the damage had been done. Later studies would reveal that the water was contaminated with lead, causing an incident of elevated blood lead levels to double, and in some cases, triple in residents' bodies, creating long-term health problems that can and will never be rectified. The Michigan Civil Rights Commission, a state-established body, concluded that the poor governmental response to the Flint crisis was a result of systemic racism. There are 5 principles of social justice that I'd like to briefly list and define. The first principle is access to resources, which means that members of every socioeconomic group should be granted equality in obtaining food, shelter, education, healthcare, and of course, clean water. The harsh reality in our country is the fact that wealthier families have better access to these resources and opportunities, which in turn set the next generation up for their own wealth and success. On the flip side, children born into poverty struggle with poorer health and fewer opportunities to get ahead in life. This is a cycle that must be broken, especially if we ever hope to achieve true social justice in America. The second of the social justice principles is equity, a concept designed to address the ongoing problem of access to resources. Equity can be explained as equality on steroids in the sense that disadvantaged individuals must be given the tools they need to achieve equality, even if such assistance seems unequal to others. The third principle is participation, where citizens have an equal voice, and the privileged minority does not make decisions for the majority. The fourth principle is embracing diversity and developing an appreciation for culture, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual identities, age, etc., that will encourage decision makers to consider the needs of marginalized communities and create policies to counteract discriminatory practices. Finally, the key principle to social justice is ensuring human rights apply to everyone in every situation. The water crisis of Flint, Michigan, and Jackson, Missouri are prime examples of how important it is that our nation implement the 5 principles of social justice. And the plight of these 2 cities illustrates how sadly America has neglected her duty to her citizens. The mere fact that poverty exists, let alone flourishes, in the wealthiest nation on earth, constitutes an unequivocal deprivation of justice. I would be tempted to declare that these pervasive injustices constitute a perverse failure of government. But the truth is, these injustices persist as a function of government. The pervasive mainstream and mainstay of social injustice, it depends upon the exhaustive strain that causes people to give up and surrender to the status quo. It is the coherent and manufactured state of indifference and helplessness for which our political system is designed to encourage and facilitate. The reason why our democracy is failing us is because, as it stands, it does not fully and equitably represent all of us. It is imperiled by the rot of systemic and social injustice, primarily driven by the greed and desire for power that holds America back from becoming a nation that provides health and opportunity for all of its citizens. And that, my dear friends, is the final word up front. I'm Sean St. Hart, and this is Coup Save America. For those of you that are watching us on YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, Odyssey, or any of our other streaming platforms, please do us a solid and click that like button. And if you're so inclined, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. You can also subscribe to our podcast. These simple actions will help us to grow and reach a broader audience, and of course will be much appreciated. To learn more about the show and view a list of all of our platforms where you can listen or otherwise access our show, please visit our website, CoupSaveAmerica.com. My guest today is a social justice, equity, inclusion, and diversity consultant and coach. She is also the host of the Diversity Dish podcast. Sedruola Maruska joins us right after the break. But before I bring on our guest, I want to quickly share a similar story of injustice. And that is the story of Brittany Martin, a 34-year-old black woman who has been sentenced to a 4-year prison term for the dubious and manufactured crime of having a verbal altercation with a police officer back in June of 2020 during a Black Lives Matter protest. What was her egregious crime? Telling a police officer, quote, "I am willing to die for the black. Are you willing to die for the blue? This is just a job for you. This is my life," end quote. By all accounts, Brittany was neither physically violent nor threatening. But of course, with our nation's cowardly and easily offended police officers, any challenge to their authority, or even the mere suggestion that they, maybe refrain from murdering black men and women, well, that's just a crime. Brittany was charged with, get this, aggravated breach of peace, instigating a riot, and 5 counts of threatening the life of a public official. She is spending 4 years in jail, and, by the way, is pregnant, struggling for the life of her baby because she happens to be loud and black. These injustices are too common. And we all need to do better. I'm not sure what the answers are, to be quite honest with you. It seems that protests are just not enough. I'm hoping that my guest will be able to shed some light on how each and every one of us can do better, not just for ourselves and each other, but for the collective whole of our society. We'll be right back after the break. And welcome back. Sedruola, I'm so I'm so bad at getting names right. joins us right now. Hello.
Hi, Sean. How are you?
I am so sorry for getting your name messed up. I'm terrible at this.
It's okay. That was a valiant effort. It's Sedruola, but Sadie,
Sedruola.
most people call me Sadie, which is what you think.
Sadie.
So Sadie is
Great.
just fine.
I am so thrilled to have you on the show today, and thank you for coming on. The first question I want to ask is what is social justice? As because again, this is one of those terms that people tend to hear, but they don't tend to always have a clear definition as to what it means. So, can you kind of start off there with us, and then explain what you do as a consultant and coach?
Yeah, what I do as a consultant and coach is not. There's a difference between social justice and equity and inclusion consulting and coaching, right? So I do equity inclusion consulting and coaching, but I also consider that my work is part of the social justice agenda, right? And social
Right.
justice is essentially making sure that everyone within a society has the rights and privileges afforded to them that across the board, that everyone has the same rights and privileges, right? You were just talking about the woman who was arrested and who has been convicted to 4 years in jail as she is pregnant. And I did read that she was struggling quite a
Yeah.
bit to save her pregnancy on a charge that would normally only carry a fine or at the max 30 days in prison. But she's been sentenced to 4 years in prison. So the, when you look at the disparities and you look at
Yeah.
that and you go, this is not equitable, what we're talking about is if one person is going to get 30, fined and 30 days in prison, then so should all other people, regardless of what they look like. It should be that this is what it is, and this is what you get in terms of policy, right? So justice is not to be subjective, it is to be objective, right? But right now we're looking at a justice system that is highly subjective. And if the subject is a person of color or a Black person, then the penalty is much harsher than if it is a white person. And
Yeah.
that's what we need to change.
Yeah. I get very emotional about this stuff, especially this just story of Brittany, because it's just infuriating. And
Yes,
she shouldn't have been charged with a crime to begin with.
at all. Hmm.
And here's the irony that I find is yet the cops. I mean, she was protesting at a Black Lives Matter event
Yeah,
against the brutality and the I'm going to say slaughter of
sure.
black men and women by the police.
Yep,
And yet the police can do this, and they seldom, if ever, face any charges or criminal accountability.
yep,
They rarely even get fired. And yet,
right.
for saying something to a police officer, 4 years in prison, I mean, I just, I don't even
There's
understand.
there's no justification for it. There
No.
really isn't. And if you would ask the people who were involved, they more than likely would just simply shrug it off and say she shouldn't have done whatever. But the thing is that she was just speaking up. So what often happens is a they're making her the scapegoat. They're making her an example, right? So if you
Yeah.
speak up, if you say too much, if you're too loud and we don't like what you're saying, we're going to charge you with something and we're going to put you in jail. It's a fear tactic. And we're tired of it. Really, if you think about it, we're really tired of constantly being told how we are to express the feelings that we have, the oppressions that we feel, because it's always do it in the corner in your
Yeah.
house where I can't hear you. Therefore, that's the best way to do it. When in reality, if I do it that way, how are things going to change? But it's not meant to make you feel comfortable. It's meant for me to express the pain and the depression and the agony that I feel. It's meant to express that, because when you're in pain, when you're in agony, when you're having an issue, you can express it however you like.
Yeah.
So again, justice all across the board. Justice meaning I can do it just as you can and not be punished more harshly than you are, simply because I look different than you do.
Well, it seems to me that when we talk about social injustice, racism is such, it's just embedded into everything.
Yeah.
And then it really just riles me up when people are like, oh, well, we're not a racist nation, or well, but we elected Barack Obama, so how can we possibly be racist? And it's like, it doesn't work that way. The system, it was literally built. I mean, and people don't want to hear this, but America was built on a foundation of racism, beginning with the slaughter of Native Americans and then the enslavement of black people. And for all of the advancements that we've made in the civil rights era, it almost feels like there's kind of been a regression. But at the same time, people forget the civil rights era is not over by any stretch of the imagination.
Right. The thing is, what people don't seem to understand, and what I often try to bring out in the work that I do, is you have to understand your part in the racist system, right? When we talk about racism and we talk about racists, people often think, well, those are the people who are overtly rude or mean or hateful towards someone who doesn't look like them. And that partly is true.
Right.
However, if you look at what racism is a system of power. It is saying that I, because I am white, have power over all other people, and I am going to create laws and processes and procedures and all things that are going to keep me in that position of power. And so when now people of color and black people come into these different systems and they're trying to progress, there's a system of power that is holding them down. That is racism. You are a racist, and this is going to be very controversial and people are not going to like to hear this, but I need for people to sit with this for a moment. You are a racist if you benefit from this system of power without fighting against it or doing anything to change it. You are a racist. Therefore, that makes a lot of people uncomfortable because they know that they are simply sitting home saying, I'm not racist, I don't see color, and all of the things that we hear, but not doing anything to try to change the system. And if you're not trying to change the system, you are part of the system because you're benefiting from this system. Is meant to benefit you, and you're benefiting from this system. So if you're benefiting from this system and you're not trying to dismantle it in any way because you are benefiting from it, you are a racist. Whether you spit on someone, beat up someone, treat someone badly or not, doesn't matter. You are still a racist. It is still embedded in you because you are benefiting from and not fighting against the system, and also choosing not to see the system as it is.
I totally agree with that. And what I have to laugh because it's just how people cannot see the system for what it is. I mean, you have to be deliberately ignorant to not see the system for what it is, right? I mean,
well, I thought that for a very long time, because for a very long time, I would commiserate with my family, my friends, all, people of color, and we would always say, oh my God, can't they see this? Why can't they see this? And then I started to realize that there's a certain reality that people are shielded from so that they don't see it. And they don't see it unless they actively try to see it, unless they're actively listening to people who are saying, this is what's happening. And they go, instead of going, that's not what's happening, they go, really? Let me dig into this a little bit. that's when they would see something. But most people don't want to deal with it. They don't want to have to see it, because just like the Matrix, you can't unplug and then plug yourself back in. Once you see, you cannot unsee, and therefore you have to do something. And the easiest way to avoid that is to not see. Therefore, I don't have to do anything. But then that simply makes you part of the system, and that makes you a racist, right? That makes you part of the matrix. You're a battery, and you're charging the system.
Why, it seems as though there's two points to that. One is, you know what? Get uncomfortable, fellow white people. Right? Get uncomfortable. You should be uncomfortable. There's nothing about this system that is tolerable. And by the way, white people, it affects you too. This people tend to think that but it's just, look at our prison system. Look at, the water
There are
crisis.
so many things that you can unpack when you're talking about racism. And one of the things that I often say, what I do is I coach individual business leaders. And I say that to your team, of why it matters to the team, to the organization. And one of the things that I often say is, racism does not only affect the people that it's oppressing, it affects the oppressors, right? I also say that as people of color and Black people, we have generational trauma that we are dealing with. We understand our generational trauma, and we are dealing with it. We are breaking generational traumas every day. White people do not believe that they have a generational trauma, which they do. Because if your ancestors could sit under a hanging Black human from a tree and eat food and play games, you have generational trauma that you need to fix. If your husband was going out to rape an enslaved person that you didn't even believe was a full human being, and they went and did that over and over again, you have generational trauma to deal with. The problem is, white people think that racism is a Black problem, but it is not a Black problem. It is a white problem that is oppressing other people.
Yes.
And white people are not willing to look at the generational trauma that they carry that is continuously causing this. They want to say, why are we worried about that? It was 200 years ago. It was 400 years ago. Well, why are we worried about the Constitution? Why are we worried about the laws? Why are we worried about so many different things that have been around for that much time? Because it has been scientifically proven that traumas can carry generationally. And so if I'm carrying trauma generationally, so are you. And if you're trauma, then you're perpetuating that cycle.
What, it's so frustrating. The Black Lives Matter, right, was inspirational for me. And I thought, okay, well, first off, people finally got to see, thanks to cell phones, that this stuff happens, and it happens every day. And, so you would think, again, stupid me, that, okay, we're going to see change. No! Things have just gotten worse. I mean, it's almost the police now just like, yeah, we did it. I mean, it's just George Floyd. I mean, so it seems obvious to me that, protesting, as important as that is, that's not solving the problem. Politically, there doesn't seem to be any solutions at this point. What can we do? I mean, what should I be doing to fight back even more?
Well, the thing that I like to say, and that I strongly believe, is that so many people have given their power over to, you name it, the government, their business, their corporation, whatever, they haven't taken the time to look at themselves and to hold themselves accountable for the things that happen. So they have to do that. The inner work is absolutely necessary when we're talking about equity, inclusion, social justice, when we're talking about basically what we're talking about is seeing humans as humans and treating them as such. So we're talking about people caring about other people regardless of what they look like. And I'm not saying not to see color. That is such a fallacy. What I'm saying is see color, see who they are, see what their traditions are, see what their values are, see all of them and still accept and love them as a human. So what we do individually is we take our power, we self-examine, we take our power and we spread it out to the next person. We cannot think that we're going to just do it for the whole country. That is something that will definitely drive each and every one of us mad because it's not possible. But what you can do is take a look at where you are. First of all, if you are, whatever your job is, you have some power in terms of how you treat people and how you stand up for people or have uh, or amplify people's voices. You have some power. I don't care what job you have, because as a human who cares about other humans, that is what you need to do. Now, if you hold a power position, you even have more power to say, okay, what is my position here? And the people that I work with or that work for me, how do I use that knowledge and that power to empower them to also use their voices and their power within this work? Because I guarantee everything in this country, I know you said that some people don't believe that this country is built on racism,
Too many
but
people.
there are so many, there's so much proof, there's so many things out there that you just have to reach out and learn. This country was built on that. The laws were made that
Hmm.
way. And it's the same way that the corporations create their own policies. They go, I don't like the way that Black person or that Indigenous person or that gay person is walking, talking, wearing their hair, wearing their clothes. I'm going to make a policy for that. We're going to make a policy for that. It's the same way that laws come in, right? We don't like that they're encroaching on our space. We don't like that they are doing better than we are in many cases. We don't like that they are actually flourishing. So we're going to shut them down and we're going to make sure that they're not doing that. So let's burn them down. Let's redline them. Let's
Yeah.
put them in the worst part of town where we make sure that we put our city dumps or we put our electric systems or we put our the worst water, right? We're talking about water. Let's do that. Let's corral them over there and we'll just do this over here. And then let us poison people's minds into believing that they live like that because they want to live like that.
Right.
That's how they choose to live instead of owning your responsibility and that you have in creating this system that has corralled them in this way. So we really have to honor the power that we hold. Those of us who are um, in this work, those of us who are invested in doing this work, need to honor the power that we hold, and then get find a way to give other people that motivation to look within themselves also to do this work. Because you can do this work out here all day long. We see corporations that are performative all the day long.
Oh,
But
or co-opting. They love to co-opt
yes,
social justice.
yes, yes, they want to, they want, we're, we're cool, we're woke, we're whatever, without
Yep.
making a change. So then we go back to the definition, right? If you are in this system, you're benefiting from the system and you're not changing the system, you're just making it look prettier. You're letting words evolve, you're letting the ways that you do things evolve, but they're all within the system. You are a racist organization and you really need to take a look at that.
Yeah, and well, like Nike, for instance, right? Yeah, it's great that, they supported Colin Kaepernick, but you're still using people of color in foreign nations with slave labor. It's like, yeah, no, the co-opting is really something that just irritates the hell out of me, because it's just,
Yeah.
there's almost something even more evil about that.
Right. It's kind of like let's not tell the left hand what the right hand is doing.
Right.
Right? We're going to do this over here and we're going to make it look really good. But over here, we've really got to still think of the profits. We really still got to think of the shareholders. We really got to, and all that sort of thing. When we put money first before people, we lose all the time. And that's why America is losing $3.6, I think, trillion every year within the economy that can be directly traced back to racist policies and procedures within the workplace, within the zeitgeist. So, you're gonna lose, right? Everybody loses. And once everybody starts to understand how everybody loses, and that this is everybody's work to dismantle this, got to get in there and do it. We're still going to have fights like this. We're still going to have, the people who don't want to hear it, the people who hear it and just shrug it off and think, I'm not racist, so I don't need to be worried about it. But you are.
Well, and this is, when it comes to Republicans in particular, and their whole, critical race, which is, first off, that is not being taught in public schools. That is a college level curriculum in the first place.
Right.
But this idea that you shouldn't or you can't talk about race,
Right.
I mean, to me, that has always been a problem.
The idea that you cannot talk about race stems from the idea that if you talk about race, then you are a racist, and if you talk about race, then you are creating the problem.
Right.
If you tell me that I'm making Band-Aids that don't look good on your skin, you're the problem. It's really that simple, right? It's like, if I'm talking about a problem that is affecting me, but it doesn't affect you and you feel a little bit offended by it, then we shouldn't be talking about it. Critical race theory, the conversation around critical race theory is the most ridiculous, and it shows the most ignorance possible in these lawmakers who bring it up as if it were some theology that we were indoctrinating children with. That is not real. So what they do is they take that, they make it into this monster, and then they package it to say, well, when kids are taught about slavery, when they're taught about the Tulsa massacre, when they're taught about lynching, when they're taught true American history, that is a problem. That's basically what they're saying. That's a problem. So therefore, we're going to water it down. We're going to make it exactly what we want it to be. We're going to make it say what we want it to say. And if you bring in any of these other things that make us a little uncomfortable, we're going to push it aside. We're going to put it under the critical race theory umbrella that really does not exist in elementary school, but we're going to create it. And we're going to put it there so that now people are afraid for their kids to learn this, because now we're learning this over here. It's incredible to me.
And the thing is that kids, first off, and especially children of color, they already learn about race the moment they enter society and the public education, or any education system for that matter.
Yeah.
And
it doesn't take long for a child to see that there are disparities in the ways that they're being treated.
Yeah. And then that brings up education and the the disparities there. I mean, it everywhere you look. And
yes.
I often tell people, I'm like, what if the people that we're losing, if you want to talk about how this affects everybody, What about the black Einstein that we're not going to get because
Right.
we've got underfunded? What about the next people, the inventors and the people that are going to solve the problem? It's not. I mean, and we. This brings up the other problem is that we don't even recognize
Yeah.
the black heroes of our own time, let alone in the past. I
Right.
mean, the what was the movie that was about NASA? Um,
Oh, Hidden Figures.
Hidden Figures, right? I mean, that shouldn't have. I mean, it should have been a movie, yes, but it shouldn't have taken a movie for people to know
Even know who
this.
these women were. Yeah.
And it just seems as though, and this is what I try to tell people, if it not been for, I mean, we owe such a debt of gratitude for our modern society to people of color. I mean, to people of every race and ethnicity, right? And we are losing when we have underfunded schools. And this whole idea that we shouldn't, the states' rights, and part of the problem is we need federally funded education
Hmm.
to make sure that all schools have the funds that they need. This defunding of schools, well, the teachers and the test results are not. Yeah,
Yeah.
that means more funding is needed,
Hmm. Right.
and we're losing so many brilliant children that
Yeah.
we are robbing them of their potential.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah. Through the years, so many people have been robbed of their potential simply because they did not fit the the majority idea of what they should look like, right? We've lost so many and so many patents that were given to
yeah,
white people really belonged to black people who worked alongside them and who came up with the ideas but were not allowed to file. And so therefore their genius, their brilliance was taken, was stolen. And it's really sad. There's so many things that we use on a daily basis that were invented by black people, and
hmm,
nobody knows because they weren't Einstein or they weren't uh, Alexander Graham Bell, right? They were a black person, came up with it, and then they were working with someone white who said, okay, well, you can't do it, let me do it. But they weren't allowed. And so that's how you kind of wash away history. You wash away those people and you wash away the potential. You say, and you continue to perpetuate the idea that if someone is not white, that they are less intelligent, less motivated, less inclined, that they have no capacity. And you continue to perpetuate that. And white teachers believe this, and white physicians believe this. And because this is the story that is perpetuated, because
yeah,
this is the system that was built this way. I often tell people
yeah,
is like workplaces were not designed for all people. They were designed for white men who had
right,
wives at home taking care of children. And when women came into the workplace, when people of color, when black people really came into the office spaces, because they've always been working, and now they come into the office spaces, nothing changed. The only thing that was adjusted is you got a bathroom and you now needed to assimilate into this space that was never meant for you, never built for you. And in that space, you are still being kept down. So there's so many things. I tell people all that you tug on one string in any capacity. You tug on one string, you're going to find a whole lot of what you don't want to see.
yeah,
Whole lot of.
yeah. No, and it's. I mean, to be honest with you, it's disheartening and it's dispowering because I mean, you see sort of like this Lego castle, and every time you think that you can dismantle one, you find five more appear.
Right. And that's why I encourage people not to look at the whole big picture, because the whole big picture can be so overwhelming, and that's when you go, you know what, there's nothing I can do, and you go into your shell and you don't do anything. I encourage people to often just look within, yourself, see what your power is, see what your passion, whatever your passion is, what are you excited about, what you're doing, what your work is, all of it. Look at that, and then examine your relationship within the equity and inclusion, diversity, social justice. Examine your relationship with that. Then do what you can where you are. Don't stay silent where you are. Don't think that you go to work and you can't talk about that. Maybe you can't talk about it outright, but there are things that you can do that can help that work forward. But believe that you have a power. It is not someone else's power. You don't have to wait for the powers that be, big brother, whatever it is, to tell you what to do when it comes to what your beliefs are. Do something about it yourself. And you're more powerful than you know. And that way you don't have to look at everything, because you can affect change in this thing, right? It doesn't matter what you're doing. You're a barber, you're an artist, you're a, a doctor, you're a lawyer, whatever it is. In your capacity, you have the power to change things. You just have to
Yeah.
believe that and see that.
And, I often tell people, yeah, I have white privilege. And here's the thing, use it however you can,
Yes.
right? Don't,
Spend that privilege.
exactly. It's not, I do think that for some people, it's just so, oh, I don't want to even acknowledge that I've got white privilege, because that puts me, again, it's making people, people want to be comfortable. And this is something that,
Yeah, but the thing about privilege is that we often overlook that privilege is not just about money, right?
oh, right.
It's about what you I have privileges, right? We all have different privileges. I have the privilege of being a Black woman who has gone to college, gotten a degree, and I have different privileges, right? White privilege is simply one of the privileges that you have. But that privilege is what the system was made to look at. And that is what the system acknowledges. And that's why we bring out white privilege. But we all have different privileges. We just have to understand how to use the privileges that we have to affect the change that we want to see. And since you have that white privilege, that is just another privilege you need to use in the work that you have. Use it to amplify someone's voice. Use it to bring information forward about something that you've learned. Use it to change things. It is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to
Right.
embrace and to use within the work, right? You have white privilege? Sure, fine. That doesn't make you a bad person. What makes you a bad person is if you know you have white privilege and you don't do anything with it that is beneficial to anybody else but yourself. Now you're a
Yeah.
problem.
And the other thing, and some people, especially on social media, I've got people that get very upset because they disagree with this. I will engage with someone who is racist. It's my duty to engage with them. This idea that you should just, oh, well, they're racist. Nope, bye, cancel, delete, block. No. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to convert people.
Right.
But I can sure as hell try, and I can have conversations, and if I can, what I find, and this kind of goes to what you're saying about doing this at an individual level, because what I've found that works is, first off, calling someone a racist, that closes the door. I mean,
Right.
so that's a dead end right there.
Yeah.
But when you are able to present people, you have to have the conversation that person is willing to have.
Mm-hmm.
And you can often, when you start pointing out certain things, all of a sudden, sometimes it clicks and they're like, oh, I didn't see that before. And so
Right.
it's not even about converting people, right? It's just about having conversations like, but wait, I want you to look at it in a different way. It's about shaping people's perspectives.
Shifting perspectives. Yeah, absolutely.
But I've got friends that just they're like, oh, but you're enabling them. You're enabling racists. You're tolerating.
So, I will say that there are different levels, right? There are some people who do racist things inadvertently.
Right.
And if you bring it to their attention, they may have a knee-jerk reaction and then they lash out, and that's a person that you have to pull back from. Or they may go, oh my God, I didn't realize that. Like, explain it to me. Like, I don't understand. That is the person that you can have a conversation with,
Right.
right? There are different levels. And I tell people all the time, as someone who is in this work, I do not engage with people who show me that they have this big brick wall up, because it is a lot of work for me, emotional work for me, to do that. I simply share information, and then if you are not open and willing to hear it or listen to it, or take it, or even question it, right? You can question it. Then we can't have a conversation. If we can't have a conversation, we're really not going anywhere. So I'm not going to argue with you. I would like to have a conversation with you. We
Right.
can have a conversation. That's different than arguing with me that everything that I'm saying is wrong and that you are right for whatever reason you believe that you are right, right?
Yeah. And that's so much a part of it too. Is people are just sometimes so caught up on being right that that's all that matters, and so they're not, when they're not willing to accept new information or analyze things differently. And
A question. You have to question, right? You say, why is it that so many people believe this? Or why is it that there's so many people behind the Black Lives Matter movement? What does that mean? Rather than say that, they automatically go, well, all lives matter. Now blue lives matter.
right,
Now dogs' lives matter and cats' lives matter. That's not helping the conversation. The conversation happens when you say, what are they talking about? What is it that I need to know more about this? Because why would so many people be saying the same thing, and everyone's saying, oh, they're all of them together collectively, they have lost their minds, right? So you have to be able to go, oh, okay, well, let me look into this, let me question this, let me try to understand this. But when you don't do that, when you simply have a knee-jerk reaction and you push it away and you say, oh, those people, they're just troublemakers, they just victims, they're victim mentality. I mean, I've heard so many different things. Then you're
how dare you be upset that cops are killing
right,
black people? How dare you? What's
yeah,
wrong with you?
right.
Calm down.
Yeah, calm down. That's not the way to say it. If you would say it in a calmer voice, maybe you could tone your voice down. Oh, don't go in the street. Maybe you could just stay in your yard or your house and say it. Then that would be better. No,
Yep.
it's just that your comfort is more important than people's lives, and that's a problem, right? Your comfort, if your comfort is more important than people's lives, then you are not ready for a real conversation about how you are a racist living and feeding and benefiting from this racist system, and you're not willing to look at it. Can't talk to you because that's too much work for me.
Right.
Emotionally.
And again, social justice really does have its entangled in racism at its very core. You cannot escape from that. Now, there's sexism in there as well.
Yes.
There's a lot of discrimination, but it really comes from this place of racism.
Yes.
And it's just, we can't even have a conversation in this country about like reparations. I mean,
Reparations.
I mean,
No. Even when there are clear circumstances where the United States government has paid people based on the
yes,
wrongs that they've done to them, uh, you know, uh, Black Americans, how dare you?
yeah,
And this country was built on the backs of Black people. Honestly,
literally,
literally.
yes,
This is not figurative. This is literal. This country was built on the backs of Black people. People who were doctors, who were medicine people, who were artisans, science men, people who had careers, people who did things in their country and then were stolen and were brought here to be enslaved and to build this country, right? This country was built on the backs of humans who had other things that they would rather be doing than working this place. And that is not acknowledged in a way uh, that is beneficial or that can benefit this country is a fallacy. It's sad. It really is sad, because really this country would not be what it is without the enslaved people that were mishandled, mistreated, stolen, and then put out to pasture and said, find your way. And they did, and then were torn down every time they did. So, why do we need to look at history? Why? Because it was 100 years ago or 200 years ago. Because it informs everything that happens in the present. It informs everything that happens now.
Yeah, and a good example too of an innovator, and I don't happen to know his name, but a black physician was the first ever to perform open heart surgery.
Yeah, I don't remember his name either, but I do remember. I do know.
I mean, it's just example after example, and
Yes.
that we're benefiting from today.
Yes.
And it's just, yeah.
The traffic lights were
Oh,
invented by a black man.
yeah, and there was, the list
GPS,
is,
black woman.
you know what, I just read something about that. I'm learning all the time,
Yeah.
and it's just like, why, and I get upset, like, why the hell didn't I know that, right? I mean, and again, I know the answer to that.
Of course.
And it's just, and a lot of people, I love how you put define racism. That is, but there's also this, and people, part of this is accepting the fact that just because you are racist, because you're participating in a racist system, that just means change it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
we're all in the system.
Yes.
Right. And one of the things that trips people up is that they like to say, oh, now we have reverse racism, because you don't
right.
understand what the word racism means. You don't understand that it is a system of power. Therefore, it is not the words that I say. It is not the things that I do. It is the power that is held or that people wield. So reverse racism would need to mean that the power structure has completely shifted, and now black people or people of color are now holding power over
Right.
white people. Therefore, there is now racism.
Yeah, if I could just get you to have your people to stop oppressing my people, right? I mean, is that so much to ask? Yeah, no, I know that the absurdity, and this is just what is frustrating for me, is that every time you sometimes, especially politically, and a lot of that I think is performative. This Democrat versus Republican. I mean, I really think a lot of it's performative.
Yes.
It has to be, because it's so damn stupid. I mean, this idea, reverse racism, or, when Mitch McConnell's like, but what, reparations? But we gave them Obama. It's like, wait a minute. I mean,
Yeah.
they have to know how stupid that is, right?
There's still the mentality of, well, we let you.
Right.
We gave you.
Yes.
Or, why are you complaining because we did this for you, right? That is still centering themselves. That is still centering whiteness. That is still centering white supremacy and racism. It's clear to those of us who are looking at it and going, oh my God, what is happening? But sometimes it's not clear to the person who's saying it, because they don't understand. When somebody says things like that, I just go, they don't understand racism. We can't even have that conversation yet, because we still need to talk about the basics.
Yeah, and there's a excellent show, and it's a comedian, and it's on CNN. It's called The United Shades of America.
Okay.
And he's a black comedian, W. Kamal West, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't wait for I'm hoping that the show is still on. I went through all of the reruns, and it talks about, and it's not just about people of color, but it does the theme of the show is the United States of America, and it goes to different communities. He goes into the prison population. He explores healthcare, poverty, and it shows you up front in a very non-intrusive way. The first episode, he actually goes to a Ku Klux Klan rally and participates in a cross burning. And it's, here's this black comedian going, and he uses comedy to diffuse the situation.
Right.
And he talked about how people couldn't believe, like, why would you go to a Klan, blah, 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 right? And the interesting thing, and I agree with this completely, is he says, I'm less afraid of the person in the Klan robe than I am the person that I don't know.
Right.
And
yeah, if it's front and center, that's one thing. If you don't even realize the racism that you hold, that you've internalized, that's a whole other ballgame. It's a whole other ballgame.
And I would say that anyone who proudly embraces racism, I'm a racist, and even these Klan members, it was like, no, we're not racist. We're just white power. It's like, yeah, no, there's nothing racist about that at all.
The funny thing is that when we talk about race, white people don't see themselves as a race.
Yeah,
they're just white people, right? They're just, well, it's just me. And then there are the black people, and then there are the Asian people, and then there are the Native American people, and everybody else is a race except for them. But if this is a construct, yes, white people are a race also, and so they have to learn to hear white people and not cringe. That is basic. You have to start there.
Yeah.
And say
and this is going to surprise a lot of people, but racism actually was a construct that came out of slavery. I mean, slavery actually came first. When you look at the history, and this surprised me, there wasn't a hatred of black people. That came about as a justification for slavery, which again shows you they knew, how could they not, this was wrong.
Exactly what they were doing, absolutely.
Right.
The thing is that I read some time ago that as humans, that we cannot inflict harm on other humans unless we justify it in some way, right?
Right.
And so in order to not only justify enslaving these people that they were stealing from Africa, they had to sell that to other people so that other people would then buy into what they were doing. So they had to create this system, right? So then they said, well, they're black. Their skin is different color. They're black, so now they're evil. And we saw them with their pagan ways. They're not Christian, and they're this and they're that, all the things that were native to Africans, they made them all bad and said, this is why we need to, and we can, because again, what was it? We only became 3/5 of a human when they needed to, was it for the vote? I think it was so that they could say, okay.
The census, I think.
Right. So it's just, it's a matter of, we need this, so we're going to use your body, your person, your physicality to get what we want. And in order to do that, we have to convince ourselves that it's okay. And then we have to convince other people that we're trying to sell this to that it's okay. So how do we do that? Well, they're black, they're different, they speak different, a language that we don't understand, which means that they're savage, they're dumb, Never mind that, the pyramids were out there, and, there was mining going on, and there's mathematics going on, and all of these things going on in Africa. Never mind all of that, just look at their skin, and they don't speak the language, and they're savages. So, you have to sell this thing called race, and that's how they did it, and that's what they did. And when we talk about generational trauma, That's part of your generational trauma, right? You were sold a big fat lie, and you have been perpetuating it for generations upon generations. And now you're having a really hard time extricating yourself from that because
Yeah.
it feels bad. But you know what happens after you go through the bad feeling? It gets better. It gets better.
Do you what has been your experience when you go to do these? Do you do it as a workshop, or do you just
Right
work
now,
with?
right
Yeah.
now I'm focusing on working with individuals because the subject matter that we're talking about tends to kick up a lot of dirt. And I know that I can build a trust rapport with someone and they can share with me and they know that they can share with me freely is much better for them to be able to share as freely as they would like. And then to go into a situation that is a group situation once they've been able to reconcile their space, themselves, their part, where they want to go, how this affects them, then you can go into a group situation. So I kind of focus on individual, one-on-one coaching first, and then maybe into a group session.
Okay. And yeah, because and so much of these problems just center around the again the unwillingness or the discomfort around having these conversations,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and it does, it gets very. What
And
can
it is
someone do?
uncomfortable.
What it is? Yes, it is, but it's almost like being
But you get
ignorant
comfortable
too.
being uncomfortable. Yeah, you really
Yeah.
have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And you really have to get comfortable understanding that you're not ever going to know it all ever, right? Neither am I, right? So that's the reality of it. There's so much that there's no way that I would ever be able to get to know it. Anybody would ever be able to get to know it all. However, different people, it's just like school. Different people are at different levels at different times and different points in life, right? So always know, as long as you're growing, as long as you're taking the information and you're growing with it, then that's what is necessary, right? That's what is needed. You're not going to ever know it all, and you don't have to know it all right at the beginning, but you have to be willing and
Right.
open to say, I don't know it all. Oh my gosh, my mind is blown, I'm learning all these things. And as you grow, share it, and then you continue to grow and you continue to learn and you continue to share that information and make it, take action for it so that it makes sense that you're learning this and now you're implementing certain things, right? It's one thing to know it and not do anything with it. That's not very helpful. So
Yeah.
learn it and then take action. And I'm not saying go out and protest because everybody's job is not to protest, but do what you can, what feels right for you, not what feels comfortable, but what feels right, right? What feels um, like something that you can affect change in, even if it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. Now, what are some things other than like protesting that an individual can do within their community to effectuate change and combat a lot of these injustices?
Well, if you are looking to, like I said, if there's a specific thing that you're passionate about, say you're passionate about education, find out who's working in your community in uh, um, uh, working in education to make it more equitable. Find out what they're doing, talk to them, and ask them, how can you help? Do not take over the work. Go in
Right.
and be humble and go, how can I help you do what you're doing? Right? If you're at work and you realize that there's someone whose voice is hardly ever heard, but you know that they have good ideas, champion them. Don't speak for them, but say, hey, I think they have a really good idea. Let's hear from them. It's not about centering yourself or making yourself the savior or,
Right.
or the protector. It's about allowing people to be their own spokesperson, say their piece, but to say it in a place that they can be heard. Um, So yeah, get involved with different organizations. There's so many organizations and so many different communities that are already working really hard for so many things, for the arts, for the education, for healthcare, for everything, for food, right? For the environment. These are all social justice issues,
Yeah.
right? So find them and help. And if that's just a step too far, then what you do is step out of your comfort zone, go outside of your neighborhood, because we already know that
Yes.
we are segregated in this country, right? We're
Yes.
segregated in our neighborhoods, and this is by design, not by accident. So step out of your comfort zone, go to another community, go to a restaurant there, frequent a restaurant there, get to frequent shops there, get to know some of the people there. You'd be surprised how much you have in common versus what you think you don't have in common. Just
Oh, yeah.
go in and get to know people, because one of the costs of racism is that we have not learned to socialize together. That is one of the costs of racism. It's just a very little one, but it is huge, because it's like people have their stereotypes, they watch TV, they listen to the news, and all of a sudden they know, oh gosh, wow, they're like 3 black men coming. Oh my God, what do I do? What do I do?
Yeah.
And it's like, there are 3 black men coming. Keep walking. I mean,
Right.
it's like, would you do the same if we were 3 white men? So it's just, it's a matter of stepping outside of your comfort zone and understanding that you have preconceived notions, you have biases, you have so many things that are in your brain that you didn't put there, but that are there, and that you need to address, be aware of, and address, so that you can make a difference, right? We
Yeah.
don't have
And
to do huge things. We don't have to do big things. We don't have to go and fast or protest, or we don't have to do those things if they are not things that we are prone to doing. We do have to do something. And so find your space, find that next town over, find that school that you can help, put your kids in a school that is in a different district, and then champion that school.
that's a great idea.
Yeah, just we can do these things. We can do these things. What's important to you? Figure out what's important to you. If you're an artist and you go to a gallery and you notice that everyone that is being shown in that gallery is a white artist, ask the curator, do you ever have indigenous people show their art? Do you have black people? Do you have Asian people? Because all of these are different flavors. Do you have that here? Do you usually tend to stick with one thing? And if you're a curator, curate outside of your comfort zone. I mean, I could go on and on about the different ways that you could just make that difference. And you don't have to stay in the box that people have put you in and that you have allowed yourself to stay in. You can do it
Right.
differently.
And this box that you talk about, again, that is by intentional design within our society. It's
Yes.
designed to keep people sort of in that comfort zone. Like, don't stray too far.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
I love the
Because
idea
you might
too.
find out more than we want you to find out.
Right, and that's the key. People need to challenge the the narrative that they're being fed, whether it's by the mainstream media in particular. I mean, the way stories are framed, or the stories that are even chosen to be told.
Yep.
I mean, the mainstream media has all seemingly forgotten about the Jackson, Mississippi water crisis. It's like for the first few days it was,
Yeah.
and now all of a sudden nothing. And
Yeah.
the same thing with Flint, Michigan.
Yeah.
And that.
It's sad, as far as the news goes, it's really sad that they can't really be reporters. They have to worry about the ratings. And so because they have to worry about the ratings, they have to go with the next hot thing. And
Yeah.
the next hot thing may be of no consequence to anyone,
Often, yes.
right? Made no consequence to anyone, but they're going to talk about it because people are going to tune in, rather than just share the real news, the things that are actually happening, and the things that need to have a light shown on them. They're not, they're not doing that. So
Yeah.
it's up to us to constantly be kicking up the dirt and say, hey, look over here, look over here, look at this stuff, look what's happening. We got to keep doing that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that inspired me to kind of start this show, is I wanted to have these difficult conversations. I want people to, again, it comes down to changing people's perspectives,
Yeah.
or just informing their perspectives, because there is so much that, I mean, there are, it's built into us. I mean, there's things that I have thought that were, that are definitely racist, that I didn't know until someone challenged me, and I'm like, oh,
Exactly.
you're right. And for instance, well, this didn't happen to me, but physicians. There are a number of white physicians that, and they weren't taught this, but for some reason that and at the study, I can't remember, but it was almost startling that the number of physicians that thought that people of color have thicker skin.
Right.
Right, and something just that simple. I mean, correcting that misassumption, right?
Right.
It's just like,
yeah, it's and that we don't feel as much pain.
oh, I know, and that is,
Yeah, it blows my mind, because there's nothing biological that they can point to say that these are some of the differences. Nothing.
right. Yeah, and there's biologically nothing definitive of race. Nothing.
No.
I mean, race really is a social construct, and unfortunately, we have given this construct this unbelievable power over our society. Now, and this may be off topic a little bit, but, and again, I haven't traveled all across the world, but there does seem to be, when it comes to racism in particular, there seems to be a uniquely American pervasiveness to this. We were the last country to abolish slavery, and although I would argue that our current prison population amounts to slavery,
Sure. Yeah.
I've often told people, I don't think we've gotten rid of slavery. I think we just rebranded it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's because that. I mean, you look at the prison labor, and again, corporations are benefiting. I mean, they're.
Absolutely. So why would they push against it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's about profit. Yeah.
Yep. And so, why is it that? I mean, when you look at other countries, that
we were built on this. We were built on this. You look at other countries; they weren't built on it. They were here, and then they went out and they were like, "Oh, I'm going to bring these people back, and we're going to use them for, different things." This country was built with this, right? The White House was built by enslaved people. This country, because they started with the Native Americans, and then they brought in the Africans, because they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to do the things that they wanted to do, and Africans came with agricultural knowledge. The Native Americans had agricultural knowledge, and so this country was built on this. And so I think that makes it more pervasive here. Yeah, there is racism across the globe.
Oh, right.
There's racism across the globe, but it feels more pervasive here because it was built on this system, and it has never been dealt with or confronted. We constantly want to pretend it didn't happen. It wasn't that bad. They wanted it. That's like, when a woman says that she's been sexually assaulted, oh, she must have wanted it. It's like, no, we've got to face it head on. Until we can face it head on and say, yes, these are the sins of our fathers and our forefathers, and we want to make it right. It's always going to be this way. And that's why we have to individually take our power back. Because if you're not looking at the sins of your fathers or your forefathers, right, and thinking that didn't affect me, your generational trauma is still in your DNA. You're still passing that on. So come on, let's do this. Let's uproot this from the root.
Yeah. Well, and it drives me crazy too, because a lot of this goes back to this idea of patriotism, right? Oh, I love this, or make America great again. And my question was, when the hell was it ever great in the first place? And for whom, right?
It often begs the question, when was that and why was it great? What is in your mind? When was that and why was it great then?
And whom was it great for?
Who was it great for? Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I love to tell people, if you're not willing to acknowledge the truth of our nation, then you can't claim to love it. You can't claim patriotic, to be patriot, because you're loving a fictional country, something that did not exist.
It does not exist, yeah.
And I think that people are afraid, like, well, if I acknowledge that, then I can't love which is...
No, you can. You absolutely can, and you must. I mean, do you not love your children because you chastise them for something that they've done that was wrong? Of course not. You still love them, right? But you need to say to them, okay, this is what the problem was. This is what I saw, and this is how it could be better, right? You want to help them be better.
Right.
And that's all that the chastising is to help this country to be better. You have to be able to chastise in order for things to be better. If you just sit around and you go, well, they always get it right. They always get it right. Oh, it's so great. Such a great country. They always get it right. You're deluding yourself, right?
Yeah.
If you do that with your kids, oh, it's okay. They do better. They always do better. They're going to do better. You're going to raise a monster. You have to think about these things.
And then they're going to get into that monster's going to get into politics, and then we're going to definitely be screwed, because that's always how it works.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
right. Oh gosh. Yes.
Yeah. It's just. Yeah. No. It's again. If you're not willing to look at the past, good and bad, right? Then
good and bad, yes.
And it just seems, it really does drive me insane that we can't.
Yeah.
It always comes down to these stupid arguments.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah. There's a through line, right? There's a through line. There's a through line through history. There's a through line through our lives. If we're not looking at the good and bad in our lives, then we don't understand ourselves. There's a through line through history. If we're not looking at the good and bad through history, through our history, then we're deluding ourselves. We're not knowing ourselves, and therefore we, just like if we don't know ourselves, we can't really we can't really love or do the best for ourselves. We have to know who we are. Well, we're trying to get to know who America is. Right now, we know who America is. We're trying to get America to be better. We're saying you don't have to be this way. You can be this way. We can all move together in this direction. We can be this way, and that's what we're chastising America for, and saying, "Hey, let's do this thing. Let's do it. Let's make it better."
Yeah, I mean, and it does. I mean, I am sort of guilty of this falling into this logic. Well, if I just go out and protest, if I just make enough noise, if I just that I don't want to say it's pointless, but I'm so tired of every time a black person is killed that we have to go and repeat this cycle, because it almost seems like, okay, what the hell am I, this doesn't, it's not working. We got to do, there's got to be
more.
Yeah. And then so many people get caught up on the stupid parts of it, like the defund the police. Oh, that label is bad. Would you get over the damn label? Right? I mean,
right. Yeah.
I get, okay, maybe the label's confusing, but why don't you just look beyond the label? We're talking about redistributing.
Right, it's asking the questions. It's asking, okay, well, that doesn't make sense to me. Can somebody explain it to me? Yes, someone will be more than happy to explain what it means, right? But you have to be willing to ask the question rather than go with the knee-jerk reaction of, oh my God, they want to do this. The knee-jerk reactions never get us anywhere. We have to ask the questions beyond that. Why are these people asking this for this? What benefit do they believe that this will have?
Well, and I better ask you to explain Defund the Police, so that in case there's anybody watching that doesn't seem to get what this is. Can you kind of just quickly...
Yeah, Defund the Police is basically saying that the police cannot deal with every call that they are called on, right?
And they shouldn't, yeah.
Right, and they shouldn't. They're not equipped for it. And therefore, they are trained to deal with crime and criminals. But so the Defund the Police is basically saying, how about we stop giving the police so much riot gear, so much, power, so much, overtime to do all the work that they're not meant to do. And we funnel that into other projects, other areas that could use some support. How about we put it into mental health professionals that can help with different calls? How about we put it into maybe educating people, into helping people get off of drugs, right?
Right.
So we're funneling it into things that are beneficial to the community versus simply giving it to the police, and now the police are policing a community that they have no connection with. Right. And killing people around them, or alienating the people that they essentially are supposed to be working for, right? Take the money from there. Stop giving them so much artillery. We're not in a war zone.
Oh, I know.
And put it into things that are going to actually there are preschools that could use building and funding. There's so many different projects and that would benefit the community more so than having more police in a community to terrorize the people that are there and kill them.
Yeah, speaking of schools, I kid you not, in Los Angeles, there was a Los Angeles school that inside the school had a police division that had bombs. They were storing bombs in this storage facility at this police department. What the hell do you think? Really, you need a bomb? and they also had a tank. First off, we need to get police out of the schools. First of all,
yeah. Why?
But it's like what you said. It's almost like they're acting as though they're occupiers. They're literally almost treating us. Yeah.
For what reason? Why do they need to be militarized when people are just trying to live their lives and essentially just and the things that they find in the communities are things that are in every community. You find people that have mental health issues. You find people who are on drugs. You find people who need help that is not from the police, right? But the police have to do all those calls, and it's not beneficial. So take it from there and put it into other places. And the reason that it's hard for police to hear this is because they get overtime. They get a lot of money for overtime. They get a lot of money for different things, and they don't want to hear defund the police. It's not they want to take our jobs. We really just want to take some of your artillery away so that we can actually have a preschool for some kids over here, and some mental health professionals for people over here, so that the community can be safer all around.
Yeah, and and people need to understand too, crime is a result of social injustice. Crime is a result of inequality, income inequality, educational inequality. That's where crime comes from. And if you want to fight crime, it's the police is not the police is an afterthought.
Right.
And if we want safe communities, we have to invest in education. We have to invest in healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of
Housing.
healthcare, housing. Yes. How do you solve homelessness?
Mm-hmm.
Houses. And people are like, you're going to give a house to someone who's homeless? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly what I
because
want to do.
now they have an address, and now they can
Yes.
put that address on their application for whatever job it is that they're applying for. You realize that homeless people cannot apply for a job because they don't have an address. It's things that like that. People don't understand that because it's not their reality, and they don't ask the right questions, right? If you
Yep.
ask the question, you get the better answer, and then you can say, oh, I did not realize that. My goodness. So they're stuck in a cycle of homelessness because what are they going to do? How are they going to get off the streets, right? If they
Yeah.
can't get into a halfway house or a shelter, or how are they going to manage? And a lot of people who are on the streets have mental health issues. We
Yeah.
don't have enough practitioners. Can we take some money from the police and have some practitioners, pay them so that more
Yep.
people are interested in doing that, and therefore we can help some of the people that are on the street? There's so many reasons to take so much the money that is the overage from the police, where they're out there trying to just clear the streets so that people don't see these homeless people. Instead, how about we take the money from the police and we build homes, places that people can live, as they're trying to get on their feet, as they're trying to get clean, as they're trying to live their lives,
And it's cheaper too.
Cheaper.
That's what people. Well, but I bought my house, or I have to pay rent. Why are you just going to give a house? Because you're already paying for it. You're paying for it with the police. You're paying for it with the extras. The emergency room, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of these are cost, and when you add those up, it is extraordinarily cheaper to just provide housing. And again, it goes to safety. That's the other thing I noticed about America, is there's this mentality of a privilege. You see it in the loan forgiveness that Biden has come out with.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but I had to pay for my college education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I paid off my loans, and I'm so more than happy that other people didn't have to go through
Right.
years of paying off the loan that I had to go through. It's just, there's just this mentality of, well, if I had to do it, then you have to do it. Well, the disparities that happen with this is something that you're not understanding, right? So it disproportionately affects people who are lower income, who are working to get ahead, and having these loans on their neck as a noose, right?
Yes.
So it's there. We could keep pulling strings all night.
I know.
It's every string just set. It just brings it back to the same thing, right? Because the system is built a certain way, and it's working just as it's meant to work.
Right.
People
Yeah.
are like, oh, the system doesn't work. It's working just like it was meant to do.
Yep.
What we need to do is change the system.
Yeah, and that begins by changing the narrative, and having a different conversation. Because that's the thing; the conversations are being controlled by the system.
Mm-hmm.
You see that in the media. You see that, and to go back to like the student loan forgiveness thing. I said to somebody, I'm like, oh, I get it. So if basically we should never have a cure for cancer, because that would be unfair to
people who died from cancer.
Right. So, and the person was just like, well, but that's different.
Why?
Yeah, why?
But it's the thing is that people think that it's going to cost them something, and what it is costing them something. This whole system is costing them
Yes.
a lot. if they only knew how much it was costing them, they would be more inclined to be part of the solution, right? But they see one thing and they think, oh, that's going to cost me money. Oh, healthcare for everybody, that's going to cost me money. Uh, Loan forgiveness, that's going to cost me money. But what they don't see is that these things are already costing them more money than it will to rectify them.
Yeah.
So, you know,
And I hate I, I where I get uncomfortable is when it gets to around that cost benefit. Because yes, it is going to cost less. But I guess where get uncomfortable is like it's also just the right thing to do. It's the human thing to do. Why can't we just be
of
human?
course,
And it's
you
just
know,
like
I found that argument doesn't work very well.
I know, but it's like the
It
most
is.
basic, right?
It
It's
is the
like
most basic, and it's like it's just the right thing to do. But the thing is that you have to explain why it's the right thing to do, because in not in everybody's reality can they understand why it's the right thing to do, right? That's why then you have to bring in the disparities with uh, loans that lower income people receive and how much longer it
yes,
takes them to pay it back. And you have to bring in all of the data because people don't want to hear that it's the right thing to do because they're like, well, why is it the right thing to do? So if you can give them the reason that it's the right thing to do, sometimes they'll acquiesce and sometimes they'll just go but still, so but we can't just say because it's the right thing to do because someone else might not see why it's the right thing to do.
well, and the other thing too is I ask people, do you like doctors? Do you like engineers? Do you like bridges? I mean, all of these things require people to be educated. And the benefit to a education system that is for everyone, right, that doesn't burden people with debt is a better society. Unless you don't want physicians and scientists. I mean, the idea that you should have to go into debt to be for educate, to me, again, education is a public resource. It's take the profit out of healthcare, out of education,
Mm,
um, because the cost, again, in terms of just technology in general, the general condition of society is so immense when you have this profit motive involved in education, healthcare, um,
hmm. Yeah,
because
yeah.
and people need to understand that it
Hmm.
shouldn't be. Speaking of healthcare, you actually, my producer, and myself actually have something in common, which is cancer.
Mm.
And I just wanted to talk for a few minutes about that. Can you kind of talk about your struggle a little bit with cancer?
Yeah, I was diagnosed with the breast cancer in December of 2017, and I went through active treatments from January until July of 2018.
Wow.
I had 8 rounds of chemo, a double mastectomy, and then 30 rounds of radiation. And I'm still on hormone drugs right now, and um, they can't give me a full bill of health, but for now, I am in remission. Um, but yeah, it was,
Thankfully.
yeah, I'm grateful for that every day. And, and I think to myself, if it wasn't for cancer, I don't know that I'd be doing the work that I do now because it kind of came to kind of wake me up a little bit. um, but yeah, cancer, when I looked, we got a bill accidentally, our first bill for my first chemo treatment.
Oh.
And the one chemo treatment was $30,000. And so when I think to myself, I had 8 chemo treatments and then I had a double mastectomy and then 30 radiation treatments. In this country, that is why people go bankrupt when they get sick.
Yeah.
I would have gone bankrupt after the first chemo treatment. We would have been like
Yeah.
done if we had to pay all of that. Thankfully, the privilege that I had was that I had really good insurance through my job. And so we didn't have to pay any of that. But it's that again, right? When we're talking about healthcare and we're talking about social justice, we're talking about equity. Um, that could have been where we just lost everything and had to start over from scratch simply because I got sick
Yeah.
and had to go for treatment.
Yeah, and so many people, tearing up here, sorry. You know, the lives that that are lost every day in this country because of this healthcare system.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah. It's staggering when you think about, um, when I think about that amount, it blows my mind that this is something that someone would have to pay if they had
yeah,
no insurance. This is a bill that would be looming, that would be hanging around their necks for generations, probably, I mean, for years to come, because they wanted to live, and so they
yeah,
got the treatment that they needed to live. It's not, it makes no sense to me. And when people are like, well, I don't want to pay for someone else's health care, I'm like, because you don't understand what that means. And you don't understand how it might be you one day. I mean,
yeah. No, exactly.
just, it,
Yeah,
you can't stand apart from it. It is a reality, and you have to vote for your reality. You have to vote for what is true for you right now. And so many people vote against their best interests because they have this vision of something to come rather than dealing with what is. And so it's really disheartening.
yeah. No, when it comes to healthcare, especially, it just gets me so upset about the I mean, like COVID. I mean, again, you just look over and over again, and no one should be the idea that. I mean, yeah, going into bankruptcy is almost the best case scenario for some people, right? Because some
Right.
people
Exactly.
they just die, and they die and they suffer,
Yep.
and people just don't. I mean, there's a story of a person of color, of course, a woman who actually had breast cancer, and she was employed. She had a job, and the problem was that the job that she had would not give her time off to go to the doctor. And
Right.
so, they had her, asking for time off and all of that stuff. So she noticed I think it was a lump in her breast. And long story short, she ended up eventually going to the hospital when her breast detached.
Oh
And
God.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
But it happens about 10,000 times in a year in America. And, this was in a book, and the doctor was talking about, she had it in a bag, and the doctor was like, I was so afraid that she was going to ask if I could reattach it, and the doctor was talking about just and again, this was a poor hospital. I think it was Grady Hospital.
In Atlanta.
Atlanta, thank you, yeah, Atlanta. And the woman, anyhow, eventually, I mean, the cancer had spread so much by the time that she ended up dying. She had a family, she had kids, and the doctor, the book, I forget the name of the book, but it was basically about the problems with our healthcare system being for profit. And his point with the story was this woman had insurance. It was the economic burdens that were upon her, the conditions with her job.
Right.
And there's also the idea, and this was what was really sad, is that she knew people, she had friends that had died of breast cancer. And so she told the doctor, I'm a black woman in a black community, and we just we don't survive. And that's what she told the doctor. Black women with breast cancer do not survive. And so I was afraid to even get that confirmation. So I just put it off. And the fact that that's not like a one-time occurrence, right? That this happens somewhere around 10,000 times a year in this country.
It's not okay.
It's not okay. And so it doesn't, it does not matter even if you have good insurance. Most people have their insurance through their job. Well, guess what? If you get sick,
and your job doesn't want to give you time off, and they say the job or the doctor, and you have children. I mean, it's, I was so lucky that, my job, I worked through my chemo, but whenever I couldn't, they were fine. They didn't, I had that privilege.
Yeah.
And I understand that privilege, right? And I live in a predominantly white area. So I was in a hospital that was predominantly white, in a fairly wealthy neighborhood. So, I had all that privilege. And thankfully I had a great team, because you could be in that situation, and then all of a sudden your team is looking at you differently because you are a person of color, you are Black, and they didn't do that. So there's so many pitfalls that we have to navigate when it comes to healthcare, and it's just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, no, and I had lung cancer, and fortunately I didn't have to do chemo or anything. They just did the surgery to remove a portion of the lung. But what I recognize then and still now, and I feel guilt. There's a lot of guilt that I have, because I know, I'm very aware and conscious that my privilege is something that is, and sometimes I'm like, but why I'm no more deserving of it than someone else. In fact, someone else is probably more deserving. And it bothers me, the fact that I'm benefiting from something that other people should benefit from as well. And it's just infuriating. And there is a lot of guilt from that. And there's this desire to want to change that entire system.
Yeah.
And it is. I get what you're saying, because I do tend to look at it as a universal type, a full package. And I do get worn down a lot. And so I like your idea about taking that as, in smaller chunks, and just doing what you can within the community and with individuals. I still want to change the whole damn system, though. I want to tear it down.
We all want to do that, but we can't do it. We got to do it brick by brick, and bricks are smaller. So,
yeah. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but I want to talk to you about your podcast. Can you tell people where they can find you, how they can listen to your podcast, and just tell us what your podcast is about? Because I love the...
Yeah. Well, Diversity Dish, you can find it anywhere that you get podcasts. It's on iHeartRadio, it's on Yahoo, it's on all the places. It's in all the places. Apple. And Diversity Dish is really about dishing, which is really kind of having conversations with people of color mostly, Black people mostly, and talking about the experiences that we have, and not just the negative experiences, but just the thoughts and ideas that we have in terms of how to, change the system, and how we are working within our passions to do that. And so I've had great conversations with a number of people. You'll find that it's very diverse. The people that I talk to, very diverse in not just appearance, but in gender and in industry. And so my idea was to have conversations and allow people to be like flies on the wall, listening to two people having a conversation about things that are very important, and then maybe gleaning some information from that conversation, something that maybe they didn't know, some idea that they come and have an aha about. It's really a lot of fun.
Yeah, and again, this is one thing that does give me hope, is that we are seeing a significant decline, actually, in the mainstream media. People are, and this can be good and bad. I mean, but people are going to things like podcasts, and they're exploring a whole different world and different perspectives. And what I do. What does kind of bother me is that even that tends to be segregated, right? I mean, people don't like, oh well, but that's a black person's podcast. That's a white, It's like, okay, you can just, we got to get over that mindset.
Right.
Because that, and again, you know what? That is a racist mindset. And a lot of people do it unconsciously.
Yeah.
And
well, we gravitate to those people or those things that are comfortable to us, right?
yes, absolutely.
Honestly, with my podcast, I have made it. I've had to be intentional about getting more Black people and people of color on it because it is easier to find white professionals and white people because simply because of the way that things work. I don't know people, the places that I go to find guests, most of the lists are white people. And I go, no, I want to amplify voices that are not often heard. And so I've found that when I go directly to people, I try to find people directly and I say, hey, I love what you're doing. Would you like to be on the podcast? And of course they say yes, because it's like, oh, an amplification. And other people can do that too. It's not just the places, like Podmatch. I think that's where we met. Podmatch or all those places that put podcasts and people together don't always have like a mixture of people. So
I've noticed that too.
Yeah, so I go out and I look for people. Literally.
One of the Dr. Cornel West.
Yes.
Is one of I love. I mean, he is one of my role models. And I love. I'm very envious because I would have loved to have been a student. Talk about again racism. The whole him being dismissed from Harvard. That was mainly because his support for Palestinians. But here is a a man of such high caliber that they could just dismiss.
Oh, of course.
It's like, you would think.
It's like Hannah Nicole Jones, right? The school wanted to get her as a professor, but they didn't want to give her tenure. They didn't want to, how do you justify that? And she said, you know what? I'm going to go somewhere where I know that I'm appreciated and I will be treated better.
It really is just shocking that, actually I should clarify, I don't think that Dr. Cornel, I think the same situation applied where he was denied tenure and he's like, well, then I'm going to leave.
Right.
But you would think that threat coming from someone of his caliber would be like, oh, but no. And
it doesn't matter. It's at the end of the day, it's a very white institution and the alumni are very white and probably the board is very white. And so they figure, we'll just find somebody else that we can uplift to that caliber. And
their loss, really.
Tough. Absolutely.
Their loss.
Yeah.
So, well, I want to thank you I hope you'll come back because there's so much more to kind of unpack, and I loved having this conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you so much for appearing. Once again, are you on social media? Can people find you on Twitter, Facebook?
Yeah, I'm usually on LinkedIn and Instagram. So I'm Sedruola, Sedruola. So if you put that into your Google or your Bing or whatever you use, it's me. There is no other one. It's me.
And please subscribe to the podcast.
Thank you.
Again, it doesn't matter what, white or whatever. The whole idea of diversity, it begins with breaking out from our own shell. and exploring different cultures, however that can be done. Whether it's listening to other podcasts, watching, different films, different, or like you said, just going outside of your community.
Yeah.
Going to dinner in a different community that you wouldn't normally go to. All of these things come down to making a difference in the community, and that's really where we need to begin, because the system sucks. It's unjust, and we cannot, and it's killing people.
Yes.
Whether it's the police, whether it's the water crisis that Jackson and Flint are going through, and by the way, the water crisis is something that's happening everywhere, but that's a different topic.
Yeah.
But, so please subscribe to Diversity Dish, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
We will see you guys next Tuesday. This is Coup Save America. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a great, again, thank you so much, Sadie.
Really my pleasure.
We'll see you guys next week. Oh, thank you so much. Oh.
Yeah.